Hi guys, and it's Miss Meyer here for another episode of your favorite educational show, right? So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to continue talking about Reconstruction, and we're going to talk about radical Reconstruction. So last time we spoke, we talked about how, Louisiana for a while, right after the Civil War, was kind of run the way it used to be right before the Civil War even started. A lot of the same people were in power. There were lots of black codes or, rules in place that were, to prevent the freed slaves from actually having equality. Well, now, as radical Reconstruction is going forward in Louisiana, we see a lot more equality and a lot more equal rights being put forth for the freed slaves. Governor Warmoth, he was now the governor of Louisiana. He was placed in Louisiana. Remember, Louisiana had been separated into military districts because we weren't doing what we were supposed to do. The radical Republicans put every single southern state into a military district. Louisiana and Texas were together in one military district. And the government that put these districts into place put governors into place. And the governor of Louisiana was a guy by the name of Warmoth. And I think I showed you his picture last time, but I will, I'll put it up again. All right, so Warmoth now puts in place a new constitution, the Constitution of 1868. And with this constitution, it gave the African Americans and the radical Republicans a lot of rights that they had not known before. So this really shook things up in Louisiana, because after the war, it kind of was like it was before the war. There was, like I said, a lot of the same people in power, a lot of the same rules and laws and things like that. So now that we have Warmoth in place, we have this new constitution, there's a lot of big changes happening. One of the things in the constitution, for the first time in Louisiana history, we had a Bill of Rights that guaranteed specific civil rights. It ended segregation, which was unbelievable. And and we'll talk about this as we go on, but it ended segregation in Louisiana. Now, once radical Reconstruction was over with, it came right back, but I mean, it was phenomenal that it was ended for a period of time that quickly after the Civil War. It ended, like I said, ended segregation, which means separating by race. It said that there could be no discrimination in public places. All children, black, white, didn't matter, boy, girl, were guaranteed a free public education. That was phenomenal. It integrated schools. That was insane. That was great that it was able to do that. And the most important, it guaranteed freed slaves, only men now, women didn't get the right to vote until the 1920s. The freed men.
Vote for women, step inside. Vote for women, step inside. Oh no, really, not at the moment. Vote for women. Votes for women.
The ability to vote. And this was a big deal because, like I had said before, there were a lot of things in place, like the Ku Klux Klan and people in the South that were preventing these freed slaves from having the right to vote. So, but this new constitution in Louisiana specifically laid out these rules and said, this is what's going to happen. You need to allow these freed slaves the same opportunities as you would everyone else. And it said it it stated it, so they couldn't go against it. Governor Warmoth at the time, he really, he wasn't, I don't know, he was for this, but he wasn't for it. I mean, he was a proponent of radical Reconstruction, but he wasn't that big, on equality. He really wasn't. But, he did do a lot better job than the people that were before him. And a big thing that the Constitution of 1868 did, it's that it really opened the door for African Americans in politics. With this new Constitution, we see lots and lots of freed slaves entering into Louisiana politics. At the time of this Constitution, there were, let me just see, Louisiana, nearly 100 freed slaves served in the Louisiana state legislature. I mean, that was huge. That's a really big deal. When we have this now Constitution in Louisiana, we have radical reconstruction going on here in our state. We have Warmoth as our governor. Louisiana now ratifies not only the 13th, remember the 13th Amendment gets rid of slavery. We already did that with the end of the Civil War. But with this new Constitution, we ratified the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment. The 14th Amendment provides citizenship for all African Americans. It just basically says it there. Because sometimes, you know, my video went crazy. You know, they say, you know, well, if you didn't write that down, how am I supposed to know? Even though you should have known it. Kind of like my husband had to dress the baby the other day, and she didn't have socks on, no socks, nothing, no pants, anything. She just had a onesie on, and it's cold outside. And I was saying, you know, why does she not have these other clothes on? He said, well, you didn't tell me to put these on. Well, but, you know, it's common sense that you would put pants and socks and all that on this poor baby because it's freezing outside. Same thing is happening here with this Constitution. It was common sense that now that there was no more slavery, that all people should be equal. Well, we didn't put that in writing. So now with the 14th and the 15th Amendment, it was in writing. We told you you have to do it. So now there's no excuse. Okay? The 15th Amendment prohibits states from denying voters according to race. So it's there for them to see. It's written down in black and white. And they can't say, oh, well, I just didn't know. And by approving or ratifying, excuse me, these 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, Louisiana fulfilled all the requirements that the radical reconstruction had put into place, and we were re-entered back into the Union as a state in 1868. So we're no longer a military district. Okay, so now what's going on in Louisiana? That now we are a state. We're back into the Union. And we do have a bunch of people in our state at this time that do not like all of the gains that are being made with the radical Republicans and the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment. They're very angry with that. They form secret societies. The three big ones that we had here in Louisiana were the Ku Klux Klan, the Knights of the White Camellia, and the Night Riders. They basically all did the same thing. They terrorized people. They wanted to... Okay, I just stopped in that weird position. They wanted to scare people into doing what they wanted to do. They had a lot of people and a lot of people here in Louisiana that were, you know, working with the Freedmen's Bureau. And the Freedmen's Bureau was an agency set up to help the freed slaves and poor white people really gain their place in Louisiana. They had schools. They taught people how to read and write. They taught them how to work, you know, things like that. Anything that, you know, we're all here in the state. And these groups were really against that and wanted that to end. And basically they formed terrorist organizations in order to do that. The reason that they would wear the white robes was because they would dress up as, or they were supposed to be, the ghosts of the killed Confederate soldiers there to, you know, haunt them for doing what they were supposed to do. They were all over the place. Louisiana was filled with, I mean, we're the southern state, we were filled with them. Now, Warmoth and the radical Republicans wanted to combat this. They wanted to fight back. So they set up, you know, groups, like almost a small army to fight these secret societies. Louisiana became a battleground, and we had I think it says right here, during the 1868 election, over 1,000 Republicans were murdered in Louisiana. Most of them were freedmen or working for the Freedmen's Bureau. Some accounts indicate that 10% of all the black men in Caddo Parish were murdered during Reconstruction. In Bossier Parish, the number of murdered black men was close to 25%. So, I mean, that's just a ridiculous amount. And that's because all of this was going on. It was scary. People were afraid to speak out. I mean, they were angry that, there was, all this newfound equality and voters' rights and things like that. So they were going to take it upon themselves to end it. And it was sad. It was very sad.
After the Civil War, much of the South lay in ruins. Confederate soldiers returned home to find the landscape ravaged. It was in this atmosphere of despair that 6 Confederate veterans gathered at a local law office in the poverty-stricken town of Pulaski, Tennessee. On a June night in 1866, the Ku Klux Klan was born. Surprisingly, the origins of the Klan had little to do with the menacing behavior for which it would become known.
It was founded as a purely social fraternity, very much like a college fraternity, but without the college, purely as a source of amusement.
Using the home of a prominent Pulaski citizen as a meeting place, the founders were bursting with ideas for the new brotherhood they had formed.
They were college men, and college students learned their Greek and Latin, and so they picked a Greek word, kuklos, meaning circle, and found it had great alliterative possibilities, added clan to it. Ku Klux Klan, isn't that a wonderful sound?
To further the mystery, the founders decreed that all public appearances were to be made in disguise. Outlandish costumes consisting of flowing sheets, masks, and hats were devised. Absurd-sounding titles such as Grand Cyclops and Grand Magi were created for office holders. New members were to be called ghouls. The founders presented themselves to the town with theatrical flair. The sight of costumed men parading through the streets of Pulaski piqued curiosity. Local men were quick to join. As the Klan grew, mysterious night rides began. The early rides took on a supernatural aspect. Attempting to frighten newly freed slaves, hooded Klansmen claimed to be ghosts of Confederate dead. At first, the night rides produced little violence, but that would change as new Klan leaders realized the hooded order might be used to wage a secret war against the Yankee governments of Reconstruction. Before the Civil War, generations of white Southerners had been raised on the principles of white supremacy. It was an ideal that neither military defeat nor the abolishment of slavery could destroy. At war's end, Southern state legislatures passed measures designed to maintain white superiority. These laws, known as black codes, severely curtailed the newly freed slaves' civil rights, in effect, returning them to a state of bondage and making them second-class citizens. In response, angry congressional Republicans passed the Reconstruction Act of 1867, a strict set of laws which temporarily abolished Southern state governments, divided the South into military districts, and gave blacks the right to vote. The defeated South again felt invaded by Northern authority. White supremacy was threatened. Soon after passage of the Reconstruction Act, Klan leaders from all of Tennessee held a secret meeting in Nashville. The man granted control of the Klan was Nathan Bedford Forrest, former Confederate general and outspoken critic of Republican Reconstruction. By spring of 1868, the Klan had spread from Tennessee to every southern state. They embarked on a campaign of terror, a war of clandestine attacks. The purpose? To intimidate newly freed blacks and keep them from the voting booths.
The Reconstruction Klansman saw himself as the only vehicle to restore the Southern way of life and social order that had been disrupted by the Civil War. How do we put these outsiders in their place, these uppity blacks, through terror?
The first tactic was usually a warning, a threatening message left on the door of a target. When intimidation...
Warmoth, was trying to do everything he could at this point to end these societies, to get things on the right path. Eventually, that kind of happened, but for a while there in Louisiana, it was total chaos. It was total bloodshed. Now, Warmoth had problems of his own. He had a lot of issues. Being a Louisiana politician, he was, of course, embroiled in corruption. Warmoth, basically, it started angering a lot of his own party, started making them very mad too. And when the election came up to succeed Warmoth, he actually backed a Democratic candidate. Warmoth himself was a Republican, and he was backing a Democratic candidate, meaning he supported a Democrat instead of a Republican in his own party. That's unheard of. Even today, that's very, very rare. Well, that was, they were wondering why that was. Now, Warmoth had these voting agencies into place. He had posted a person in each voting agency. So every time a person would go and cast a vote, they would count them. It was someone Warmoth had put there. Okay? So during this election, Warmoth had all these people that he picked to run the election booths and the election places. And they, what do you know, declared the guy that Warmoth had backed as the winner. Now, if he really won or not, we'll never know. But the state returning board, or the board that was overseeing Warmoth, had said, he's lying, he's fraudulent, this isn't true. Because the Republican candidate, who was a guy by the name of William P. Kellogg, had gone to the board and said, this is not right. There's lots of fraud going on right here. They said, yeah, you're right. What Warmoth is doing is not right. So they declared Kellogg to be the governor and not McHenry, who was the guy that Warmoth had picked. So Warmoth, being the governor, said that the returning board had no authority to do this. So he appointed McHenry as governor, and the returning board appointed Kellogg as governor. So a period of time in Louisiana, we had two governors. Now, the problem was that the radical Republicans, they had said, you're doing wrong here, Warmoth. We want you out of office. And they impeached him. They got rid of Warmoth. They said, we're not going to have him anymore. So there were 35 days left to his term before one or the other, McHenry or Kellogg, could be sworn into the governor's spot. Who was going to be governor in those 35 days? And this is what's really cool about Louisiana. We actually were the first state in American history to have an African-American governor. So during those 35 days, we had a man by the name of PBS Pinchback, who was our governor of the state of Louisiana, until Kellogg could take over as governor, because that's who they allowed. All right, so by now, Kellogg is now our governor, and he's doing a pretty good job, but he's nothing really doing, he's not this big name in Louisiana. He doesn't do anything that's phenomenal that leaves a big mark on Louisiana history. The biggest thing that Kellogg did was that he was a true Republican, and he really wanted to enhance the lives of the African Americans in the state, especially the freed slaves. He appointed a lot of them to his cabinet. He did a lot of things and passed a lot of legislation to help the freed slaves. But just like a lot of the politicians in our state, he was involved in corruption and finally was impeached. So there was that what was going on. Now, about 10 years after Reconstruction had begun, Reconstruction is over with. The North finally sees that the South is not going to try and start another war. They're in no place to do so. They're extremely broke. They're trying to rebuild everything because the war was fought in the South. So they're pretty sure that this is not going to happen. There's not going to be another war. The slavery issue kind of dies down. I mean, it loses, it's not in the media as much. And so people stop really caring so much about what's going on. So around, let me make sure I have the right date, 1876, Reconstruction is over. And so Louisiana and the South kind of start to really slip back into the way that they were before. That's all I've got today. I will see you guys again soon, and we'll talk about next time. We're going to talk about Louisiana in the New South. See you later, guys.